Hello, everybody. It's time for another lesson. Are you ready for it? The title of this lesson is called Quiet Please. A little emphasis there. I like to start off with a great joke, one of my favorite jokes that really illustrates what I'm trying to talk about here. There's a guy by the name of Brother John who entered the monastery of silence, it was entitled, and the chief priest told him when he got there that, Brother, this is a silent monastery, and you're welcome here as long as you like, but you may not speak until I direct you to do so. And Brother John acknowledged that and agreed. Well, Brother John lived in the monastery for a full year before the chief priest came to him and said, Brother John, you have been here a year now. You may speak 2 words. Brother John said, Hard bed. Well, I'm sorry to hear that, said the chief priest. We'll get you a better bed. Well, the next year, a full year goes by, and Brother John was called in by the chief priest again. You may say another 2 words, Brother John. Cold food, said Brother John. And the chief priest assured him that the food will be better in the future. Well, on the third anniversary at the monastery, the chief priest again called Brother John in into his office, says, 2 words you may say today. I quit, said Brother John. Well, it's probably best, said the chief priest. All you've done since you got here is complain. That's one of my favorite jokes. And we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about silence and quietness, as the title, Quiet Please, emphasizes here. You know, my wife and I have a different way that we enjoy quiet time. As most people, everyone has their own way. Now, my wife, she likes the evening time when the house noise settles down and everything's quiet and the phone quits ringing and things of this nature. And she has the house to herself and some project for the next day that she can get to, some letter writing or whatever she'd like to do, but it's quiet and she enjoys that. And then she eases back into and going to sleep that night. Now, for myself, I guess being in the Army, I made me this way, but I enjoy the morning time. Right when the sun is getting ready to come up, even before it's still dark. I enjoy getting up and going through the quiet house when there's no noise whatsoever. Everyone's still asleep, and I have it all to myself. And I get my cup of coffee, and I go out either on the porch if the weather's permitting, or I just go into the living room quietly and just sit there and look out the window to the mountains and sip my coffee. And I think about what I had done the day before, the week past, and what I'm going to do that day. And then I also think about the future. I say, well, what about this issue and stuff like that. And I kind of go into a thought process and I just enjoy that quiet time to do that. I think we all need for ourselves that we are laid out in some way, a prescribed, dedicated way to be quiet. We too often let things that must be done over our lives and we feel like that we have no life at all. We've said that so many times. It sounds very familiar to you. We yearn for that quiet time from the hustle and bustle and expectations of everybody else wanting something from us and maybe even wanting something for ourselves. So we gripe and we complain and become very frustrated, but we won't do anything about it when we have the ability to do it. Now, there are times, like I said before, I like to sit quietly on the back porch and look at the sunset and the clouds and the beauty of nature around me. It awes me and it quiets me down, my spirit down. I'm not in that conversation mood at that time with friends or even family, but I want quietness. And it takes concentration and discipline to remain silent and allow nature to speak to me. There's always more to do and thoughts to say when I can just put that on pause and take care of that time for me. You know, as time has gone by, we've had so many inventions that and progress that we have made that supposedly would give us more time. I'll give you an example. For example, the generation or two ago, we had the thing called the automatic washing machine and dryer. Well, up until then, cleaning the family laundry literally took on an entire day. And that's why they called it wash day, because it was an all-day affair. And then technology came through with the washing machine, and you could just throw clothes into the machine and then leave it and go do something else. What a time saver. So what happened? Did we get more time to relax, to be still, to be quiet? No, we filled our time with other duties, other things that we said we can do more. I'll give you another example. The computer was the same way. It enabled us to do more work in a lot less time. But we do less work and earlier, do we not? No, we simply do more work. There's something within us, I guess, if I think about it a little bit, that compels us to fill up every moment of our time. I can feel so guilty sometimes when I'm just quiet. I'm sitting there, I'm looking out over the porch, or I'm looking out the window, and all of a sudden I think about the list of things that I'm not doing. And I feel bad about that, so I cut short my quiet time and rush back into it because I have to do something, get ahead of everything. And even if we are not talking about work to be done, we're stretched to the limit with activities that go from the grocery store to doctor appointments to friend and family events to this and to that. There's always something else we have to do, be involved in, and say yes to. It is as if we're afraid of what might happen if we would just be still for a moment. It scares us a little bit if we could just be quiet. But we're busy 24/7. But God's will for us is to occasionally stop, be still, and rest. Now, if your parents were like my parents, they were constantly telling you to be quiet, be still, and behave. Well, maybe our Father in heaven is trying to say the same thing to us as his children. Think about that. Now, how many of you, let's go back and ask you a question, have shot a bow and arrow? Now, possibly not any time lately, but you know how it works, do you not? Do you remember that? The principle still applies. But one thing I have found out by learned is that on these simple straight limb bows, you don't want to store the bow with a string attached. The reason is that over time it takes away the strength of the bow. In order to keep the bow strong and to maintain the bow's rebounding quality, you have to remove the string and relax the bow. And that's the way it is with us. If we're always strung up, we're always busy, if we are always at work, then we lose our strength, we lose our spirits, and we lose who we are, a child of God. Mother Teresa had a great quote: God rarely is found in the midst of noise and restlessness. Instead, he is the friend of silence. The friend of silence. So, what God would have us to do is just be still and be quiet in his presence. In a special moment in the ministry of Jesus, we find this reminder in the book of Mark, the 6th chapter. Let me read it to you, just a few verses. The apostles gathered around Jesus and told him everything they had done and taught. And he told them, come away to a deserted place all by yourself and rest for a while, because so many people were coming and going that they didn't even have time to eat. So they went away in a boat to a deserted place by themselves. Now let's imagine that scenario right now, can we? They would have been all gathered around Jesus, literally bubbling over with stories of what had happened in their ministry, the miraculous healings, the casting out of demons, and the hundreds of people who came to Jesus to repent and to be a follower of him. And they were excited about that. They were falling over each other, just trying to get words in, probably over talking one another, pushing and shoving to be heard. And then the atmosphere was just crackling with excitement. And how did Jesus react to this? He didn't say, oh, that's great. Come with me by yourselves to a quiet place and get some rest. That's what I want us to think about today. Jesus' reaction, the call for quietness, which, just as it was the first disciples, is a vital part of our Christian walk. It's one of my favorite stories of a missionary who was in deep Africa. He was on a long trek through the jungles. Tribesmen from around the area had hired him to carry the loads, as we see often in movies and stuff like that. The first day, they marched rapidly and went far. The missionary had high hopes of completing the journey in double quick time. But come the second morning, the tribesmen refused to move. For some strange reason, they just sat and rested. When he asked about the strange behavior they had, he was informed that they had gone too fast the first day, and that the tribesmen were now waiting for their souls to catch up with their bodies. Ooh, isn't that so deep? I mean, think about that. Waiting for their souls to catch up with their bodies. How often have we left our souls behind as our bodies went forward to do all these things we must do? There are times in our lives that we must move fast, that we know we need to slow down at some point, though, and let our souls catch up with us, not literally, but figuratively. We will rarely find God in the hectic moments of our life, but we will find him most often in the quietness. Remember Elijah, the great story about Elijah, who was told to stand on a mountain in the presence of the Lord, for the Lord was about to pass by. The Lord wasn't in the great and powerful wind that shattered the rocks. He wasn't in the earthquake and the fire that followed, but the Lord was in a gentle whisper, the quietness. Isn't it true that we prefer to see God in activity? In all the things we're doing for him? We rush around, get caught up in church events, visiting the sick, caring for the needy, and so on and so on. And please don't misunderstand me. These are extremely important ministries as a follower of Jesus to go and help and do what we can as a good steward of our time that God calls us to do. But perhaps the mistake we sometimes make is that to think that these are enough, that we've done it, we've checked the block. There's a danger that we spend all our time doing for God and not enough our time listening to God. We want to feel the strong and powerful wind. We fail to hear the gentle whisper because it's drowned out by everything else. We can even allow our personal day to become so full of that quietness is sacrificed for family moments such as birthdays and anniversaries and holidays and one event after the other. You then add on helping out with friends, caring for a spouse or children, and housework. The list goes on. By then, where's the day gone? I wonder how many of you are like me. When push comes to shove and life gets too busy, our devotional time with the Lord is often the first thing we put aside. Of course, we never consciously say, my daily quiet time doesn't matter anymore to me what the Lord wants. But rather we dress it up with nice words like, well, God will understand. We say to ourselves, after all, I'm doing his work, and I'll try to fit it in a little later. But if you really think about it, what we're really actually doing is pushing the Lord to one side in order to take care of what we think is really important. We value. Over and over again throughout each of the Gospels, we see Jesus drawing aside to be quiet and to pray. He could well have sat back and argued with God that the more time he spent in prayer and meditation, the less time he would have to preach, teach, and heal people. If I took time to do all that, I won't have time to do all this. He could have easily said that. But Jesus recognized the need for constant refreshment in the body and the soul. Isn't it almost ironic that Jesus, the Son of God, who on the face of it needed prayer the least because of who he was in fact the one who was most constant and consistent in prayer? Think about that. Why do we suppose for one moment that we can be any different? None of us would consider trying to keep our families and our friendships alive without communication. And the same goes for our relationship with God, which leads me to the very nub of our thoughts in this lesson. It's in the form of a question which I can assure you I ask myself quite often. How is my prayer life? And if you want to measure against which to answer that question, let's look at Ephesians 6:18. Pray in the Spirit on all occasions with all kinds of prayers and requests. Then we go to 1 Thessalonians, pray continually. But my purpose is not to beat you up or make me feel so guilty. with the issue, but to explore together Jesus' call to quietness and to listen and meditate and for prayer, to listen for the whispering. Now, give you a couple things here. The first significance of this need for quietness is that it usually comes in the midst of times of great activity. And why do the gospel writers go out of their way to mention it at such times? Precisely because they saw the quietness and prayer where Jesus' source of strength and replenishment came from. They knew it. They had to have it. So how can we ever hope to help others if we're running on empty, either physically or even spiritually? I'm reminded of a man who was sitting on a train chewing gum in silence. Picture that. After a while, an elderly lady leans over toward him from the opposite and says this, "Sir, that's very kind of you to tell me so much, but unfortunately I'm deaf." I think that's so funny and cute. Probably the lady didn't miss much, really. She heard more in silence than she did in words. Here's a second thing I want you to remember. There's three things. There's a second. I want us to understand about this need for quietness is that it is not a time-bound ritual. God is accessible to us at all times. Yet how often do we take advantage of this wonderful opportunity? I think one of the reasons that we resist is that prayer is costly. Think about that. It costs us time, and quite frankly, for very many of us, time is one of the most precious commodities we have. Prayer demands time, and it demands effort, and everything around us is at odds with such a commitment. If you're anything like me, once I've missed out on my quiet prayer time in the morning, for one reason or the other, some of which may be perfectly legitimate and valid, then I tend to tell myself that it's okay for the day. I'll try to make it up for tomorrow. I look at it as though I'm keeping an appointment with the doctor. If I miss the time when I'll have to wait for the next appointment, God doesn't work on appointments. He is available at all times, day or night, and for any length of time. Don't think that your prayers must be a certain length of time to make them worthwhile. I have done some most earnest prayers behind the steering wheel as I'm driving. I've done the most earnest prayers while I'm taking a walk in the evening time, and I think about nature around me, and I thank the Lord for it. Deepest prayers that I've had. And yes, time where I've knelt down and I've cried before him, and times when I just needed him in a most personal way. So the call to quietness and prayer is something that we can take anytime, anywhere. Now, here's the third and last thing I want to recognize is that there is no set formula for what our need is for quietness. There are no strict rules in what to do or how to do it in this quietness business. Try to think back when you were courting your husband or wife. I hope you can still remember back far. I have to stop and think about it myself. You have become quickly bored with each other if every date was the same and the conversation was all about just one or two topics over and over again. It's the same in our meetings and conversations with God. He is desperate for us to share our real feelings with him, to pour out our doubts and our fears, our anger, whatever it may be, and to listen to our needs and worries. And it doesn't have to be in fancy language. It's who you are. For his part, he asks only one thing, the Lord does, to listen. And that's perhaps the hardest lesson to learn for us. It's difficult enough for some of us just to listen to someone standing next to us, let alone God, with whom we are communicating in spirit, our deepest feelings and thoughts. Yet if we want our relationship with God to grow and develop in these times of quiet, we have to learn to listen with a gentle whisper. Our world today is obsessed with activity. In fact, busyness is often equated with success. The danger is that we allow this attitude to spill over into our Christian lives. The end result may be the same it is in many of today's business executives. Stress and burnout we hear all the time. Jesus recognizes that when his disciples returned after their first ministry, I'm sure that most of them would have been eager to get back on the road again. But Jesus called them to a place of quietness, a place of prayer where they could replenish their spirits. I pray that all of us will hear Jesus when he makes that same call to us. Here's my closing thought for you today. You and I need to take control of the different demands on our lives. God made you and formed you individually with care and imagination in a top quality way. He makes good products. He expects you to live your life the same way in how you treat others and yourself. So optimize your life and say, quiet, please. I'm working on a special project, and that's me. If you can't be at far off lake shore, fishing stream, or ocean beach, or a mountaintop, or a wooded cabin, then find time to escape within yourself. Find the dedicated evening. Instead of telling others around you, tell yourself. The result will be a personal discoveries and enlightenment and healing. We were created in a world of others, but we were also created individually. So rediscover that individual whom God loves. Slow down. Calm our spirits. Be silent. And enjoy the leisurely time with God. The psalmist reminds us of this when he says, be still and know that I am God. I pray for you. You pray for me. God bless.